I got a film I want to talk about. It's a little film called The Illusionist. Not to be confused with The Illusionist released in 2006, this one was released in 2010 and is a French-British animated film directed by French animator Sylvain Chomet. If he sounds familiar to you, it's because he also directed the animated film The Triplets of Belleville, which was nominated for Best Animated Picture at the 2003 Oscars. The Illusionist follows a hapless French magician as he tries his best to continue performing magic for a living. Unluckily for him, he lives during a time where the world is evolving and is no longer fascinated by his magic. Along the way, he meets a young woman who believes his magic is real and decides to tag along in his journey. Before I continue, something I want to mention for anyone considering watching this film is that there is minimal to no dialogue. There are only small phrases and exclamations throughout the film, so if you're not into that, then this may not be your cup of tea. I personally like films that do more showing than telling. It leaves a lot of room for interpretation and discussion for what the film is trying to say. And funnily enough, I think films that don't have a lot of dialogue tend to translate better across other cultures. It just goes to show how universal body language and expressions are. Now without further ado, let's go over the film's plot. Our film literally opens up with the curtains unveiling our titular character, the Illusionist, or as the subtitles like to call him, Tati Schiff. Although I'm not going to call him that, because I don't know if I'm saying that right. This is also where we receive the most amount of dialogue at once throughout the whole film. The first few moments of the movie are in black and white, accompanied with some tame piano playing, sort of setting up the vibes and giving us an idea of when this may take place. As our story begins, the Illusionist haphazardly performs his magic act to a rather unenthusiastic crowd. Once he finishes and moves aside for the following performance, we begin to see more of the type of situation he's in. The Illusionist lives in a world that is no longer impressed by his tricks, and with each passing day, his audience grows smaller and smaller. They'd rather devote all their attention to new types of entertainment such as boy bands. One day, while being ignored by an entire crowd, he catches the attention of a drunk Scotsman who decides to invite him to perform back in his hometown. This Scotsman is probably one of my favorite characters. He's just so silly and carefree. He's living a happy, simple life and we can only aspire to be like him. As the Illusionist travels up to Scotland, we are treated to some tranquil and aesthetic scenery, very soothing and pleasing to look at. While performing at the bar, there seems to be some hope for the Illusionist as the crowd is somewhat dazzled by his act. Perhaps there are people out there who still care for magic, although as soon as he finishes, he's instantly replaced by a jukebox, indicating that maybe this crowd will also move on to newer things. One person that the Illusionist does manage to captivate more than the others is a young woman named Alice.
What the fuck?
As a polite gesture, Alice decides to sneakily wash the Illusionist's shirt. Upon returning it, the Illusionist shows his gratitude by giving her a coin. But when he does this, he does the classic grandpa move, pulling the coin out of thin air. This causes Alice to believe that his magic is real and can conjure up anything from nothing. So to receive more gifts, she takes the rest of his dirty laundry to wash. During this exchange, the Illusionist notices that Alice could use some new shoes. Before he leaves the village, he manages to buy Alice a new pair and gives them to her, again performing it as a magic trick. As Alice puts on her new shoes, she decides to follow the Illusionist, but to do this, she must let go and leave her simple life behind, which I think this scene was trying to convey here. One thing that kind of irks me about this though is that Alice sort of makes this decision out of selfishness, wanting to receive more nice things and all. She also did not tell the Illusionist that she'd be tagging along until it was too late for him to turn her away. The two end up venturing to Edinburgh and meet a cast full of colorful characters at the hotel they stay at. At least, I think they were colorful at one point. We have a part-time clown, triplet acrobats, and a ventriloquist. All of these characters seem to be in a similar position as the Illusionist, being that they are slowly losing work to more modern forms of entertainment. From here on out, our story sort of splits into two. On one hand, we have the Illusionist struggling to find work as a magician, slowly running out of money and hope. And on the other hand, we have a fish out of water story with Alice, as she begins to discover a new world outside of the countryside. Their stories occasionally intertwine, and when they do, we get Alice asking for more things from her sugar daddy, the Illusionist performing more magic tricks for her, and sometimes nice little interactions between the two. Now, I realize that I may not be painting Alice in the best light, but as selfish as she may come off, I do think she's still a decent person. I'm sure if she knew that the Illusionist magic wasn't real, she wouldn't be so needy. At least I hope. I mean, he does try to tell her the truth at one point, but is unable to due to the language barrier between them. Although I also believe that the Illusionist enjoys having one last person to perform magic tricks to. Alice also takes interest in the other tenants of the hotel and treats them as friends. She does unknowingly save the clown's life just by giving him a bowl of soup, a gesture that meant a lot to him. But back to our story. As the Illusionist's performance proved to be unprofitable, he takes up a second job at a repair shop, despite having no knowledge about cars. He is tasked with washing a car on his first night, but can't even figure that out. Inevitably, he is found out and fired the next morning. Time passes by, and some of the other tenants of the hotel begin checking out, moving on with their lives. But before they leave, one of the acrobats refers the Illusionist to another job in case he ever needs work. We are then presented to a new Alice, who has assimilated to her new environment. She is more confident and elegant than when she first arrived. As they go about their days, the Illusionist finds out that he has lost his spot at the music hall to a boy band. Seeing that he has no use for his magic kit anymore, he gives up and pawns it off to a local shop. And if you pay attention, you will see that sadly the ventriloquist has also fallen to the same fate. Having nowhere else to turn, the Illusionist takes up the acrobat's offer. While working at his new job, he can't help but practice his magic tricks, earning him the attention of a salesman. Meanwhile, Alice discovers the presence of a new type of daddy living across the street. The salesman offers the Illusionist a job performing magic at a store as long as he advertises their clothing. He begrudgingly accepts but finds the work demeaning. At one point, Alice goes by to say hi to the Illusionist at his new job but gets shooed away by him, causing her to run into the man from next door. The Illusionist quits his job very soon after and wanders the city, contemplating on what to do next. Passing by the job he just quit, he sees that they had replaced him with another magician. Suddenly, he catches Alice out with her new man and believes that even she has replaced him, that she no longer needs him anymore. This finally pushes the Illusionist to accept reality, and perhaps that he should move on from magic. He lets go of the last remnant of his magician life, setting his rabbit out into the wild to be with the other rabbits. To me, this is one of the saddest scenes. I failed to mention that the Illusionist had this rabbit throughout the whole film, sort of serving as comic relief. The rabbit came off as hostile towards the Illusionist, but this scene here shows that it didn't really hate him after all. At this point, Alice has fallen in love with Mr. Next Door. After their date, she returns to the hotel, seemingly excited to tell the Illusionist about her day. Although, upon her arrival, she finds nothing but her packed luggage and an envelope. In the envelope is some money and one last letter from the Illusionist that reads, "Magicians do not exist." The last few moments of the film show our two main characters proceeding to the next chapter of their lives. Alice starting her life with Mr. Next Door, and the Illusionist off to find a new purpose. The Illusionist does get one more opportunity to perform a magic trick for a little girl who looks a lot like Alice, but decides against it. The movie ends by giving us a few more glimpses of Edinburgh. The lights throughout the city turn off one by one until we are left in front of the music hall. The last light lingers for one final moment before it turns off, finishing the film. The structure of the film is different from most other films, and one could say that the plot is rather aimless. Not in a bad way though. There's just no grand goal or anything that the characters have in mind. This film literally depicts the day-to-day life of a struggling man trying to get by. The Illusionist is also kind of short, clocking in at around an hour 15, but due to its slow pace and unexciting nature, it can feel a little longer. Although there is a good bit of visual poetry going on, giving it much more depth to the story. So if you have a keen eye for that kind of stuff, you may be able to pick up on some deeper thematic elements. The animation of this film is astounding. One thing that stood out about it is how you can pick out the strokes of a pen within the characters. It reminds you that these are drawings made by human hands. It makes you appreciate it that much more. The characters also have this grittiness to their designs, but in a way that makes them charming, if that makes sense. The environments and settings of this world are greatly detailed and alive. Sometimes if you glance at the background, you may catch something funny going on. Prior to watching this film, I watched the trailer to see what I was about to get myself into. It looked like a very cheerful and magical movie, something that would put a smile on my face. Boy, was that misleading. The subject matter of The Illusionist, while not entirely upsetting, does leave you feeling with a sense of hopelessness. You watch an old man slowly lose hope in himself. He realizes that the world is changing, and he is unable to keep up with it. He settles for less and less, until he believes that he is nothing special and expendable. It can be quite disheartening and may not be the best film to watch if you're in a similar spot. With my first couple of viewings, I wasn't really able to understand the role of Alice's character. At first, she only seems to burden the Illusionist, as her belief in his magic causes her to depend on him for nice things. So in a way, it was kind of like a sugar daddy baby relationship. I did eventually start seeing the relationship as more of a father-daughter relationship, since it does seem that they do end up caring for each other in that sort of sense by the end. Although after my most recent viewing, I think Alice's role can be seen as a duality in regards to the Illusionist's character. While the Illusionist is old and unable to adjust to the new world, Alice is young and adapts to her environment after leaving her home in the countryside behind. While the ending of the film is a little depressing, I think there is a glimmer of hope. The final moments of the film show that the illusionist is starting to move away from being a magician, instead of clinging on to a losing battle. As he rides away on the train, one can only hope for a better future for him. The Illusionist tells its story in an unfamiliar way, which is probably why it's not very well known, although it says a lot for something with very little dialogue. These are some of the things I took from the film, but some may see it differently. I may be wrong about some aspects, and other things may have gone over my head. Either way, I think this film is pretty neat, and should be noticed a little more. Okay, bye.